"Don't hurt me. I can't walk," begged the poor girl. Then the Mafia boss changed everything. The cobblestones outside Palazzo Nero glistened with fresh rain, reflecting the warm amber lights that spilled from the grand windows above. I pressed my palms against the cold stone wall, trying to find my balance. My left leg had gone numb again, the kind of numbness that came from standing 12 hours straight on an unhealed fracture I couldn't afford to properly treat. The emergency room had given me a brace and a prescription I never filled. 3 months later, I was still limping through double shifts at one of Milan's most exclusive venues. Inside, crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across faces that would never notice mine. I was furniture that moved, clearing glasses, refreshing champagne flutes, nodding at commands in 4 languages I'd taught myself from library books and late-night podcasts. My uniform was black and severe, designed to make me disappear against the mahogany walls. "Elena, the VIP section needs another round." Marco, the floor manager, barely looked at me as he spoke. "And smile. You look like you're attending a funeral." I manufactured the required expression and loaded my tray. The VIP area occupied the entire mezzanine level, a space most staff never entered unless summoned. Tonight it hummed with a different energy. Security had doubled. The guests moved with calculated precision, their laughter measured, their glances sharp. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step a negotiation with my failing leg. The voices grew louder as I approached, Italian, Russian, something that might have been Mandarin. I understood fragments, enough to know these weren't the usual bankers and tech executives who rented the space. Then I saw him. He stood near the far window, silhouetted against the Milan skyline. Even from across the room, his presence was gravitational. Dark suit tailored to mathematical precision. Salt and pepper hair swept back from a face carved from better genetics than most people deserved. He didn't speak, just listened, his stillness more commanding than any gesture. His cologne reached me before I reached the table, bergamot and cedarwood, expensive in a way that announced itself quietly. I set down the champagne glasses with hands steadier than my heartbeat, keeping my eyes appropriately lowered. "Grazy," one of the men said absently. I was turning to leave when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I should have silenced it. I should have waited. But the number on the screen was the hospice, and they only called for 2 reasons: payment reminders or emergencies. I stepped into the corridor and answered in the only language that mattered when my grandmother's life was balanced on a tightrope of medical debt. "Igen mi taint," the Hungarian words rushed out. "Is she breathing? Did her oxygen drop again?" The nurse's voice crackled through a bad connection. My grandmother's pneumonia had worsened. They needed authorization for the ventilator, which meant another €3,000 I didn't have, wouldn't have, couldn't even pretend to imagine having. I must have made a sound, not quite a sob, something more desperate and animal. When I opened my eyes, he was standing there. The man from the window. Up close, his eyes were darker than I'd thought, almost black, and they cataloged everything about me in 2 seconds. The worn shoes, the way I kept my weight off my left leg, the phone still pressed to my ear like a lifeline. "Hungarian," he said, not a question. I disconnected the call with numb fingers. "I apologize. I'll return to." "You understand Italian, Russian, probably French and German from the way you responded to table 7 earlier." He spoke English now, accented with something Eastern European layered under Italian polish. "How many languages?" "6, sir, I should." "Matteo." He didn't raise his voice, but a man materialized from the shadows. "Clear my schedule for 15 minutes. Conference room." It wasn't a request. It wasn't even really directed at me. But somehow I followed him down a corridor I'd never accessed, past security that melted away at his approach, into a room where the art on the walls cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. He gestured to a leather chair. I remained standing because sitting felt like accepting something I didn't understand. Your grandmother, he said, hospice costs. The question was so direct it short-circuited my usual defenses. That's not your concern. Everything in my building is my concern. He moved to the window, giving me his profile. You've been working here 4 months. You arrive early, leave late, never call in sick despite the fact that you're clearly injured. You speak 6 languages but work for minimum wage. Why? Immigration status limits options. The truth came out flat, and I need every hour I can get. How much do you need? I should have walked out. Should have understood that nothing came without strings, especially not from men who commanded rooms just by breathing. But the nurse's voice was still echoing in my skull. Authorization needed, time sensitive, your grandmother is asking for you. 30,000 euros, for the ventilator, the medications, the hospice care through the end. I met his eyes. I don't have it, I'll never have it. He pulled out his phone, typed something. Done. They'll have authorization within the hour. The room tilted. I can't accept. You can, you will. He pocketed the phone and finally looked at me directly. In exchange, you'll work for me. 3 months as a translator and assistant. The terms are non-negotiable, but they're clean. No clubs, no entertainment, just business meetings where I need someone who understands what's being said beneath what's being said. I don't understand. Yes, you do. You've been watching us all night. You saw Dimitri signal his associate about the shipping manifest. You noticed when Carla's smile didn't reach her eyes during the toast. You speak languages, but more importantly, you read rooms. He named a figure that was triple my current salary, plus accommodations, transportation, and all medical expenses for your grandmother covered. The offer was too generous, which meant it was dangerous. But danger was relative when your grandmother was drowning in her own lungs. Why me? Because you're invisible, people don't watch their words around the staff, and because you need this enough to say yes but smart enough to know you should say no. He extended his hand. My name is Victor Constantin. I own this building and several others. Some of my business is entirely legal. Some operates in gray areas. None of it involves trafficking, drugs, or harming civilians. If you work for me, you'll see things that require discretion. Can you provide that? His hand hung in the air between us. An offer, a trap, a lifeboat. I thought of my grandmother's labored breathing, the mounting bills, the impossibility of my current trajectory. 3 months, I said and shook his hand. His grip was warm and firm. Matteo will handle the paperwork. A car will pick you up tomorrow at 8. Bring anything you want to keep. The address I'm providing is where you'll be staying. He handed me a card with an address in a district I'd only seen from bus windows, where diplomats and executives lived behind gates and security systems. I can't leave my apartment. I share it with 3 others. Your grandmother is being transferred to a private facility tonight. Better equipment, better staff. She'll want you nearby. He moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. In my world, loyalty isn't demanded. It's earned. I'll earn yours, Elena. You'll find I keep my promises. He left me standing there with a business card in my shaking hand, and the feeling that I'd just signed something written in a language I was only beginning to understand. The car that arrived the next morning was a Mercedes with tinted windows and a driver who introduced himself as Stefan, former military, current discretion. He loaded my 2 suitcases without comment, didn't ask about the books spilling from the canvas bag, just held the door and waited. My roommates had barely looked up when I'd told them I was leaving. In cities like Milan, people came and went like seasons, and poverty made sentimentality a luxury none of us could afford. The building Victor had directed me to wasn't as ostentatious as I'd feared. A converted 19th century palazzo with security so subtle I almost missed it. The apartment was on the 3rd floor. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with appliances I didn't recognize, and windows overlooking a private garden where someone had planted roses that bloomed despite the late season. A woman in her 50s was waiting inside. I'm Lucia, she said in brisk Italian. "I manage Mr. Constantine's properties. Your grandmother is settled at Casa di Riposo Santa Chiara, about 15 minutes from here. Mr. Constantine arranged for Dr. Weber from Zurich to consult on her case. He arrives tomorrow." I set down my bags carefully. A Swiss respiratory specialist. "Mr. Constantine doesn't do things halfway." Lucia handed me a folder. "Your schedule. Language lessons, he wants you fluent in Mandarin within 6 weeks. Etiquette briefings, wardrobe appointments, and this." She placed a phone on the counter, sleek and encrypted. "His number is programmed. He expects availability but not obedience. Learn the difference." She left before I could formulate questions. I stood in the empty apartment, surrounded by furniture that cost more than I used to earn annually, and wondered what the hell I'd agreed to. The phone rang an hour later. Victor's voice came through with the clarity of expensive technology. "Elena, the car will take you to see your grandmother in 30 minutes. Afterward, dinner. We need to establish ground rules." "I haven't unpacked." "Lucia will handle it. Your time is better spent elsewhere." He disconnected before I could argue. Casa di Riposo Santa Chiara smelled like lavender instead of antiseptic. My grandmother's new room had a window overlooking olive trees, and the machines monitoring her breathing were silent instead of beeping every 3 seconds. She looked smaller than I remembered, her face peaceful in medicated sleep. A nurse appeared beside me. The Swiss doctor reviewed her charts remotely. He's optimistic about a treatment protocol that could add 6 months, possibly a year. Mr. Constantine insisted on the best. I touched my grandmother's hand, paper-thin skin over bird bones. Why would he do this? The nurse smiled. "You'd have to ask him, but in my experience, powerful men don't perform acts of charity. They make investments." The question was what kind of return Victor expected on this particular investment. Dinner was at a restaurant where the host greeted Victor by name and led us to a private room screened by rice paper panels. The table was set for 2, the lighting deliberately intimate. Victor had changed into a cashmere sweater that probably cost what I used to make in a month. He looked younger somehow, or maybe just less guarded. "Your grandmother is comfortable." "More comfortable than she's been in years." I sat across from him, maintaining the professional distance that felt like my only remaining defense. "The doctor, the facility, the equipment, it's too much." "It's exactly enough." He poured water, not wine, into my glass. "I meant what I said about earning loyalty. Your grandmother's care is covered regardless of your performance. That's not leverage, it's foundation." "Then what is this?" I gestured between us. "What do you actually need me to do?" "I need you to listen. I have partners, associates, who speak in code even when they think they're speaking plainly. I need someone who can catch the implications, the threats, the promises hidden in courtesy. You've been doing it your whole life, haven't you? Translating not just words but intentions." He was right, but I didn't give him the satisfaction of confirmation. "And if I hear something criminal?" "Then you tell me, and I decide how to respond. But understand this, most of what I do isn't illegal. It's simply inconvenient for certain people who prefer monopolies to competition. I facilitate shipping routes, negotiate contracts, provide liquidity for ventures that traditional banks won't touch. Sometimes that puts me at odds with entities who weaponize regulation." "You're describing organized crime with better PR." His smile was slight but genuine. "I'm describing the gap between law and justice, but I appreciate your directness. It means you're not naive." He slid a document across the table. "Your contract, 3 months, renewable by mutual consent. Compensation as discussed. Termination clause available to you at any time, no penalty, though I'd appreciate 2 weeks' notice." I scanned the pages. The terms were cleaner than I'd expected. No exclusivity clause, no restrictions on future employment, an NDA that seemed reasonable. What's the catch? "The catch is that you'll see things that might scare you. People in my world settle disputes with lawyers and leverage, not violence, but the stakes are real. If you're uncomfortable, you can leave. But while you're here, I need your complete discretion and your best work." I signed before I could second-guess myself. Victor's hand brushed mine as he retrieved the document. "One more thing. You'll attend formal dinners, business meetings, occasional cultural events. Lucia has arranged for appropriate attire. Don't argue about accepting it. You're representing my organization and presentation matters. I'm not going to be some decorative. If I wanted decoration, I have a catalog of volunteers. I want competence, but competence that looks the part. There's a difference between pride and pragmatism, Elena. Learn to recognize it." He stood, the meeting apparently over. A driver materialized to take me back to the apartment, where I found my belongings unpacked and arranged with more care than I'd ever managed myself. On the bed lay a garment bag with a note in Victor's angular handwriting. "Tomorrow, 7 p.m. Il Giardino. Wear this." Inside was a dress in deep emerald silk, simple but exquisitely cut, with a pearl necklace that glowed against the fabric. I held the pearls to the light, wondering if they were real, then decided I didn't want to know. I dreamed that night of cold cobblestones and warm interiors, of doors opening onto rooms I'd only ever glimpsed from the outside. When I woke, the phone Victor had given me showed a message. "Your grandmother is asking for you. Take the morning. We'll brief this afternoon." At the hospice, I found my grandmother awake and lucid for the first time in weeks. The ventilator had been removed, replaced by a gentler oxygen system. She smiled when she saw me, then her eyes sharpened. "Kislanium," she whispered, "who is paying for this?" I pulled a chair close and told her everything. The offer, the contract, the apartment, the man with gravitational presence and a business I didn't fully understand. She listened without interrupting, her weathered hands folded over the crisp hospital linens. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then, "This Victor, what's his family name?" "Constantin." Something flickered across her face, recognition or memory, I couldn't tell. "Constantin," she repeated slowly. "There was a Constantin family in Budapest before the war. They dealt in shipping, trade routes through the Balkans. Dangerous business, dangerous times." Her grip on my hand tightened. "But they paid their debts, and they protected their people." "You knew them?" "I knew of them. Your grandfather did business with the father, I think. Victor's father, if this is the same family." She studied my face. "Are you safe with him?" I thought about Victor's careful distance, the contract with its termination clause, the way he'd arranged my grandmother's care without demanding anything in return yet. "I think so, but I don't trust easily." "Good, never trust easily, but also recognize when someone keeps their word. That's rarer than diamonds, Kislanium." We sat together until she tired, her breathing steady for the first time in months. As I left, the head nurse caught my arm. "Dr. Weber called. He'll be here Friday to assess her directly. Mr. Constantin has arranged for him to stay in Milan as long as necessary." The briefing that afternoon took place in Victor's office, a space dominated by floor-to-ceiling windows and technology that looked military-grade. Matteo, who I was learning served as chief of staff, operations manager, and occasional bodyguard, walked me through the basics. "You'll accompany Mr. Constantin to business dinners, contract negotiations, and select social events. Your role is to observe, translate when asked, and report any discrepancies between what's said in different languages. You don't take notes in public, everything is memorized and reported privately." He handed me a tablet loaded with dossiers. "Study these. Our primary associates, their interests, their leverage points." I scrolled through faces and bios. A Russian oligarch with ties to Siberian mining, an Italian industrialist with a shipping empire, a Chinese investor whose fortune came from rare earth minerals. All men who operated in the space between legal and gray. "What about enemies?" I asked. Matteo exchanged a glance with Victor, who had been reading something on his laptop. Victor closed the screen. We have competitors. The most significant is Lorenzo Salvetti, old money, political connections, and a belief that Milan's infrastructure contracts belong exclusively to families like his. He views my entry into the market as an invasion. Is he dangerous? He's careful. He uses lawyers and regulators as weapons, but he's also proud, which makes him predictable. Victor stood and came around the desk. You'll likely encounter him at some point. Be polite, be forgettable, and never repeat anything he says directly to you. He'll try to plant false information to test our information flow. And if he threatens me? He won't. You're under my protection and he knows it. That's worth more than any contract. Victor's expression softened slightly. Alina, I won't pretend this is without risk, but the risk is primarily reputational and financial. Physical threats are rare in my world, bad for business, draws unwanted attention. Most conflicts are resolved through restructuring and leverage. It should have been reassuring. Somehow it wasn't. That evening, I wore the emerald dress to Il Giardino, where Victor had reserved the entire rooftop terrace. The city sprawled below us, lights twinkling like fallen stars. Other guests arrived in pairs and small groups, the faces from Matteo's briefings, dressed in designer labels and inherited jewelry. Victor appeared at my elbow, his hand settling at the small of my back, a gesture I would learn was his signature, public protection blended with private guidance. Stay close, listen more than you speak, and if anyone asks who you are, you're my executive assistant specializing in international relations. The evening blurred into a performance I'd been rehearsing my whole life without knowing it. I smiled at the right moments, laughed at jokes I'd heard variations of in 3 languages, and cataloged every tension ripple beneath the polite surface. Dmitri, the Russian from Palazzo Nero, cornered me near the bar. So, Victor has found himself a polyglot, convenient and decorative. How long before he grows bored? I kept my expression neutral. I imagine about as long as it takes him to find someone more useful. He laughed, genuine surprise lighting his face. She bites. Victor does choose well. He switched to Russian, testing. Tell me, does he trust you yet? I wouldn't presume to know. My Russian was accented but fluent. Trust takes time. Indeed it does. Dmitri raised his glass in salute and moved away. Victor found me minutes later. What did Dmitri say? He was testing my Russian and trying to assess our relationship. I watched Victor's face for reaction. He seems to think you collect useful people. I do, but I also value them. Victor's hand returned to my back, steering me toward the terrace edge where we could speak privately. You handled that well. Dmitri respects competence above all else. Below us, Milan breathed and pulsed. Up here, I stood beside a man who moved through the world like he owned it, wearing a dress that cost more than I used to make in 3 months, pretending I belonged. Victor seemed to read my thoughts. Imposter syndrome is normal. You're learning to inhabit a different social stratum, but remember, you earned your place here through skill, not luck. These people, he gestured at the glittering crowd, most inherited their power. You built yours from nothing. It was the kindest thing anyone had said to me in years, and coming from him, it felt like an investment paying early returns. The night ended without incident, but as Stefan drove me home, I noticed another car maintaining distance behind us. When I mentioned it to Victor via text, his response was immediate. Security protocol. You're covered. I fell asleep that night with pearls still around my neck, too exhausted to remove them, dreaming of surveillance and safety tangled into the same thing. Dr. Weber arrived from Zurich on a private flight and spent 3 hours examining my grandmother. I sat in the hospice waiting room, drinking terrible coffee and trying not to calculate the cost of every minute. Victor appeared without warning, which I was learning was his style. How is she? I don't know yet. Dr. Weber is still with her. He sat beside me, and I caught that bergamot scent again, power and proximity. I spoke with him this morning. He's cautiously optimistic. There's a new immunotherapy protocol being tested in Switzerland. If your grandmother qualifies, it could significantly improve her quality of life. And you've already arranged for her to be considered. I made inquiries. The decision is ultimately yours and hers. He handed me a folder. The research, side effects, success rates. No pressure, just information. Dr. Weber emerged before I could respond, his expression carefully neutral. In accented Italian, he explained that my grandmother's pneumonia was responding to antibiotics, but her underlying condition was progressive. The immunotherapy might buy time, months or possibly a year, but it wasn't a cure. She's comfortable, I asked. Very, and her spirits are good. She asked about you. He glanced at Victor. And about Mr. Constantin, she says she remembers his father. Victor's expression remained neutral, but something shifted in his eyes. Does she? After Dr. Weber left to arrange the treatment protocol, Victor walked with me to my grandmother's room. She was propped against pillows, looking more alive than she had in months. Her gaze found Victor immediately. Constantin, she said in Hungarian accented English. You have your father's eyes. He was a hard man but fair. Victor moved closer, his usual confidence replaced by something more tentative. You knew my father. Budapest, 1956. My husband worked the railway yards. Your father needed shipments moved quietly during the uprising. He paid in gold when currency was worthless. He could have used threats. He chose partnership instead. She looked at me, then back at Victor. My granddaughter, you chose her for her skills. Among other reasons. Good, she's skilled. She's also fragile in ways she won't admit. My grandmother's voice was fierce despite her weakened state. If you damage her, I'll haunt you from whatever comes after this. Victor's smile was slight but genuine. I believe you would, but I have no intention of causing harm. Elena's value to me is her perspective. I don't want to break that. My grandmother studied him for a long moment, then nodded. I trust you'll keep that promise. Now leave us. I need to speak with my granddaughter alone. When Victor had gone, she gripped my hand. He's telling the truth, Kislanium. I can see it. But truth and safety aren't the same thing. His world has rules you don't understand yet. Be careful. Learn fast. And remember, you always have a choice. I signed a contract. Contracts can be broken. What matters is whether you want to. She settled back into her pillows, exhausted. That Constantin, though, he looks at you like you're a problem he wants to solve. Decide whether you want to be solved or whether you want to remain delightfully complicated. I left her sleeping and found Victor waiting in the corridor, hands in his pockets, more human than I'd yet seen him. Your grandmother is formidable, he said. She's survived things that would have broken most people. I know. I read her file. At my sharp look, he raised a hand. Before I made the offer, I needed to know who I was working with. Your grandmother's history, your immigration struggles, the accident that damaged your leg. I don't make investments blindly. I should have been angry. Instead, I felt oddly relieved that he'd done the research, that this wasn't impulse but calculated decision. What did the file tell you? That you're resilient, resourceful, and too proud to ask for help even when you're drowning. That you put your grandmother's needs above your own to a degree that's admirable and concerning. That you speak 6 languages because you taught yourself, not because you had opportunities handed to you. He met my eyes. It told me you were exactly what I needed. Which is someone who understands that power isn't about domination. It's about creating conditions where everyone benefits. He started walking toward the exit, and I fell into step beside him. I'm building something, Elena, a network that operates on different principles than the cartels and the old families. Fair contracts, equitable distribution, protection for the vulnerable. It's idealistic, which makes it dangerous. Because people like Lorenzo Salvetti prefer the old ways. Exactly. They see my approach as weakness, but it's not. It's long-term strategy. Loyalty built on fear collapses eventually. Loyalty built on mutual benefit endures. We reached his car, but he didn't open the door. I need people around me who believe in that principle. Do you? I thought about my grandmother's words, "You always have a choice." I believe in actions more than words. Show me you mean it. Fair enough. He opened the door for me. Tomorrow we have a meeting in Monza, manufacturing contract negotiation. Bring your sharpest ears. The meeting in Monza took place in a converted factory that still smelled of machine oil and ambition. The Italian industrialist, Carla Rossini, met us with a smile that didn't reach her eyes and an entourage that included 2 lawyers and a man she introduced as her financial advisor. We settled into a conference room with windows overlooking the production floor. Victor reviewed the contract terms, a partnership arrangement that would give him access to Carla's shipping infrastructure in exchange for capital investment and political connections. Everything seemed straightforward until Carla switched to rapid Italian directed at her advisor. I caught fragments about Victor's background, questions about his liquidity, implications that his funding sources might not withstand scrutiny. I said nothing, just filed it away as Victor had trained me. The meeting concluded with handshakes and promises to finalize details within the week. In the car afterward, Victor turned to me. "Well, she's not negotiating in good faith. She asked her advisor if your money was clean enough to pass regulatory inspection. She's either planning to leak your financial information or use the threat of it as leverage to renegotiate terms." Victor's expression didn't change, but his jaw tightened. "Interesting. Did she indicate timing?" "She said after the ink dries but before the first transfer. So, immediately post-signing." Classic. She gets the commitment, then weaponizes compliance. He pulled out his phone and texted rapidly. "Thank you. This saves me considerable trouble and possibly a year of litigation." "What will you do?" "Find a different manufacturing partner and make sure Carla understands that betraying confidence has consequences in this industry." He pocketed the phone. Nothing violent, nothing illegal, just a quiet word to her other partners about reliability concerns. I watched Milan's industrial outskirts give way to city proper. "You said your world operates on leverage." "It does, but leverage cuts both ways. Carla just taught me she can't be trusted. That information is valuable." He glanced at me. "You're uncomfortable." "I'm adjusting. In my old world you couldn't afford to make enemies. You kept your head down and survived. In my world you can't afford weak partnerships. They become liabilities." His voice softened. "But I understand the discomfort. You're learning to think strategically instead of defensively. It takes time." That evening, Lucia appeared at my apartment with another garment bag. "Mr. Constantin requests your presence at dinner. La Scala Opera House, then private reception. The dress code is formal." Inside was a gown that made the emerald dress look casual, midnight blue silk with silver embroidery, a neckline that was daring without being inappropriate, and a matching wrap. The jewelry box contained diamond earrings that caught the light like trapped stars. I called Victor directly. "This is too much." "It's appropriate for the venue. Trust me, you'll be underdressed compared to some attendees." He paused. "Alina, I need you to understand something. These events aren't just social. They're where deals are made, alliances are tested, enemies reveal themselves. You're there as my partner in this, not as decoration. Dress the part so you can play it." The opera was Verdi, La Traviata, which felt grimly appropriate given my grandmother's condition. Victor's box was positioned perfectly for watching both the stage and the other boxes. He pointed out key players during intermission, politicians, business leaders, and several faces I recognized from Matteo's briefings. "There," Victor murmured, directing my attention to a box across the theater. Lorenzo Salvetti, gray suit, third from the left. Salvetti was older than I'd expected, maybe 60, with silver hair and the kind of aristocratic features that came from centuries of selective breeding. He was speaking animatedly to a younger man beside him. The younger one is his son, Marco, Victor continued. Less clever than his father but more ruthless. Watch them. During the second act, I caught Salvetti staring at our box. Not at Victor, at me. His expression was calculating, the way someone might assess a new chess piece on the board. The reception after the opera was held in a palazzo that made Victor's building look modest. I stayed close to him as we moved through rooms filled with old money and older grudges. Several people congratulated Victor on recent business successes, their smiles tight. We were near the champagne fountain when Salvetti materialized beside us. Up close, his eyes were cold and intelligent. "Constantin, I see you've brought a companion." His Italian was pure Milanese aristocracy. How refreshing to see new faces at these tired events. "Alina is my executive assistant," Victor said smoothly. "She's been invaluable." "I'm sure she has." Salvetti switched to English. "Tell me, my dear, how do you find working for Victor? Is he as progressive as he claims?" It was a test, obviously. I kept my expression pleasant. "Mr. Constantin values competence and results. I find that refreshingly straightforward." Straightforward." Salvetti's smile sharpened. "In my experience, those who claim transparency often have the most to hide." He addressed Victor directly now. "I hear your manufacturing deal with Rossini is progressing. Such a crucial partnership. I hope nothing jeopardizes it." Victor's hand settled at my back, that familiar gesture of control disguised as courtesy. Business always carries risk. The key is proper due diligence. "Indeed." Salvetti's gaze lingered on me for a moment too long. "Well, I won't monopolize your evening, but perhaps we should have coffee soon, Constantin, discuss matters of mutual interest." He drifted away, leaving a wake of expensive cologne and implied threat. "He knows about Carla," I said quietly. "Probably. He likely encouraged her betrayal. This is how Lorenzo operates: turn your partners against you, then offer himself as the solution." Victor steered me toward a quieter corner. "He's also now very interested in you. That complicates things." "How?" "Because you're an unknown variable in his calculations. He'll try to determine your value to me, which means potential surveillance, background checks, possibly attempts to recruit you as an informant." Victor's voice was calm but serious. "I need you to be very careful over the next few weeks. Stefan will always be your driver. Don't deviate from established routes. Don't meet with anyone from my business world without clearing it with me first." The protective concern in his voice was unexpected and unsettling. "You think he'd try to hurt me?" "Number Lorenzo doesn't damage potentially useful people, but he might try to compromise you. Fake scandals, financial pressure, threats to your grandmother's care. I won't let that happen, but you need to be aware." We left the reception early. In the car, I watched the city lights blur past and tried to process the shift. I'd gone from invisible to visible, from irrelevant to strategic. The change was dizzying. "Victor," I said into the quiet, "if this becomes too dangerous, then we'll reassess. Your safety isn't negotiable, Alina. Neither is your grandmother's care. I made promises, I keep them." That night I lay awake in the expensive apartment, wearing diamond earrings I'd been too tired to remove, thinking about promises and the different kinds of chains people wore. The pearls from the first dinner sat on my dresser. The diamonds pressed cool against my skin. Beautiful chains, as my grandmother had once called jewelry, but chains nonetheless. The difference, I was starting to understand, was whether you chose to wear them or whether someone locked them around your neck without asking. The next morning brought surveillance confirmation. Stefan pointed out the sedan that picked us up 3 blocks from my building and maintained distance through morning traffic. "They're not trying to hide it," he said. That's the point. They want you to know you're being watched. I called Victor from the car. His response was immediate. Come to the office. We need to discuss next steps. His office felt different in daylight, less intimidating, more functional. Mateo was already there, along with a woman I didn't recognize. Victor introduced her as Sofia, head of security. Lorenzo's making his move earlier than expected, Victor said without preamble. The surveillance started yesterday. He's also initiated a financial audit through a regulatory contact, trying to freeze some of my accounts temporarily. Can he do that? I asked. With the right judge and the right evidence, yes. He's using bureaucracy as a weapon. Victor pulled up documents on the screen. But we anticipated this. I've already started asset distribution through subsidiary companies. He'll find the main accounts clean and compliant. Sophia leaned forward. The surveillance on Alina is concerning. It suggests he sees her as either a vulnerability or an opportunity. Or both, Mateo added. If he can flip her, he gets inside information. If he can threaten her, he gets leverage over you. Victor's expression was granite. Neither of those outcomes is acceptable. Sophia, I want personal protection assigned to Alina effective immediately. Low profile but constant. And I want counter-surveillance on Salvetti's team. If they're watching us, I want to know who's doing the watching and what they're reporting. Already in motion, Sophia said. She handed me a device about the size of a credit card. Personal alarm. Press and hold for 3 seconds and every security asset we have will be directed to your location. Keep it on you always. The reality of the situation was crystallizing. I wasn't just translating anymore. I'd become a piece on the board, and the game had stakes I was only beginning to understand. There's a gallery opening tomorrow night, Victor said. Contemporary art, high-profile attendance. Lorenzo will definitely be there. I need you with me. As bait. As statement, you're not his to intimidate. You're under my protection, which means you're untouchable. He must have seen something in my expression because his voice gentled. Alina, I won't force you into danger. If you want to step back, we can arrange for you to wait out this conflict somewhere safe. I thought about my grandmother's warning, you always have a choice. What happens if I leave? You keep the apartment, the salary, your grandmother's care continues uninterrupted. The contract has a termination clause you can invoke at any time. He held my gaze. But understand that leaving now sends a message that Salvetti's intimidation works. It invites further pressure. And staying. Staying means we face this together. You continue learning the business and I continue protecting you. Eventually, we neutralize Salvetti's threat through leverage and strategic repositioning. A pause. I'd prefer you stayed, but it's your decision. The choice was clear, which somehow made it harder. Run to safety or stand my ground in a fight I didn't fully understand. I glanced at Mateo and Sofia, both watching me with professional assessment. Then back to Victor, whose dark eyes held something that might have been hope. I'll go to the gallery, I said. Victor's shoulders relaxed fractionally. Thank you. Lucia will handle your wardrobe. Sofia will brief you on security protocols. And Alina, he waited until I met his eyes. You're not alone in this. That matters. I spent the rest of the day in a crash course on personal security, how to identify potential threats, safe positions in any room, extraction routes, code words that meant different levels of danger. It was simultaneously empowering and terrifying. That evening, I visited my grandmother. She was sitting up, reading a book in Hungarian that Dr. Weber had somehow procured. She looked stronger, her color better. The new treatment is working, she said by way of greeting. Dr. Weber says I might have more time than they originally thought. I pulled a chair close. That's wonderful news. It is, which means I'll be around to see how this situation with your Constantine resolves itself. She set down the book. You're in deeper than you expected, aren't you? Much deeper. I told her about Salvetti, the surveillance, the escalating tension. She listened without interrupting, her expression thoughtful. His father faced something similar, she said finally. A rival family tried to force him out of Budapest. They used police, bureaucrats, every official channel they could corrupt. But Constantine Sr., he was patient. He built alliances, documented everything, and when the time was right, he didn't just defeat his enemies. He absorbed their operations, made their people his people. Victor mentioned his father. Victor is his father's son, I think. Strategic, protective of what's his, patient when patience serves him. She reached for my hand. But you need to know what you are to him, Kislanium. Are you an investment, an ally, something more personal? I thought about Victor's careful distance, the way his hand always found the small of my back, the concern in his voice when discussing my safety. I don't know, maybe all three. Then be careful. Men like Victor, they don't love the way ordinary people do. They love the way generals love their best soldiers, with pride and possessiveness and a willingness to sacrifice for strategic victory. She squeezed my hand. Make sure you're not the sacrifice. I left the hospice with her warning echoing in my thoughts and found Stefan waiting with the car. On the way home, I noticed we were being followed again. Different sedan, same intent. They're getting bolder, Stefan said, his voice professionally neutral. Mr. Constantine has authorized additional measures if you approve. Apartment security upgrade, encrypted communications, dedicated protection detail. How much will that cost? Stefan glanced at me in the rearview mirror. With respect, miss, that's not your concern. Your safety is Mr. Constantine's priority. The expense is irrelevant. It should have been reassuring. Instead, it felt like I was becoming increasingly valuable, which in Victor's world meant increasingly vulnerable. The gallery opening was in the Brera district, a space that had been a church in some previous century and now housed installations that probably cost more than small countries. I wore a dress in deep plum. Lucia had called it aubergine. That somehow made me look both professional and dangerous. Victor met me in the gallery entrance, his hand immediately finding that familiar position at my back. You look formidable, he said, and there was something in his voice that wasn't entirely professional. I feel like I'm wearing armor. In a way, you are. Confidence is its own protection. He guided me inside, where contemporary sculptures and paintings competed with the frescoed ceiling for attention. Salvetti is already here, far corner, near the installation that looks like industrial waste. I spotted him immediately, silver hair, impeccable suit, surrounded by people who leaned in to catch his words. He saw us at the same moment, and his expression shifted into something calculating. He's going to approach us, I predicted. Undoubtedly. Remember, be polite, be forgettable, and if he tries to speak with you privately, decline gracefully. We circulated through the crowd, Victor exchanging greetings with various attendees. I was introduced as his executive assistant so many times the phrase became meaningless. People's eyes slid over me, categorizing and dismissing me in the same glance. Except for Salvetti. When we finally came face to face near a sculpture of twisted metal, his attention focused on me with uncomfortable intensity. Constantine and the invaluable Elena. He spoke English again, probably for my benefit. Tell me, are you an art enthusiast? I appreciate skill and vision, I replied carefully, whether the medium is paint or persuasion. His smile sharpened. How diplomatic, Victor, you've trained her well. Elena needs no training. She came to me fully formed and exceptional. Victor's voice carried an edge I hadn't heard before, possessive and warning. Her insights have already proven invaluable. I'm sure they have. In fact, I've been meaning to ask, Elena, would you consider consulting for my organization? I'm always looking for talented polyglots. I'd be willing to match whatever Victor is paying, plus 20%. The offer hung in the air between us, a test and a trap simultaneously. I felt Victor's hand press slightly harder against my back, not restraining, just present. I appreciate the offer, Mr. Salvetti, but I'm very satisfied with my current position. Are you, even knowing that Victor's business activities may attract regulatory scrutiny, that association with him could complicate your immigration status? Salvetti's tone remained pleasant, but the threat was clear. I'm simply suggesting that diversifying your professional relationships might be prudent. Victor's voice dropped to something cold and dangerous. Lorenzo, if you're threatening my associate's immigration status, you're crossing a line that will have consequences. Threatening? I'm offering career advice. But if you're so concerned about Alina's welfare, perhaps you should consider whether your protection is as solid as you believe. Salvetti's gaze shifted to me. Think about my offer, my dear. The door remains open. He moved away, leaving tension crackling in his wake. Victor's jaw was tight, his usual composure fractured. He just declared war, I said quietly. Yes, and he did it publicly, which means he's confident in his position. Victor pulled out his phone, typed rapidly. We're leaving. This situation just became more volatile than I anticipated. We were halfway to the exit when I heard the commotion. Raised voices near the gallery entrance. Official-looking men in suits flashing identification. Financial police, conducting what they called a routine compliance check, but was obviously anything but routine. Signor Constantin, the lead officer said in Italian, we need you to accompany us to answer some questions about recent financial transactions. Victor's expression was calm, but I felt the tension radiating from him. Of course, may I see the authorization? While they produced paperwork, I scanned the crowd. Salvetti was watching from across the room, his satisfaction barely concealed. This was his move, public embarrassment combined with temporary detention. Victor turned to me. Alina, Stefan will take you home. Matteo will meet me at the station. This is standard intimidation. They'll hold me for a few hours, ask irrelevant questions, and release me when their warrant expires. How can I help? By staying safe. Go to the apartment, lock the door, and don't answer for anyone except Stefan or Lucia. His hand found mine for a brief moment, a gesture that felt far more personal than professional. I'll call when I'm clear. They escorted him out, professional and visible. I watched through the gallery windows as they directed him into an unmarked sedan. The message was clear. No one was untouchable, not even Victor Constantin. Stefan appeared at my elbow. Miss, we should leave now. The crowd is becoming too interested. In the car, I sat in numb silence while Stefan navigated traffic with the efficiency of someone trained for evasive driving. We picked up a tail almost immediately. The same surveillance team from earlier, now closer and less subtle. They're pushing, Stefan said, his voice tight, testing our response protocols. My phone rang, Victor's encrypted number. I answered immediately. I'll be detained for approximately 4 hours, he said without preamble. Long enough for Salvetti to make another move. Sofia is coordinating additional security for you. Stay in the apartment. Don't open the door for anyone. I've arranged for a protection detail outside your building. Victor, this is escalating fast. I know, we're moving to contingency plans. I'll explain when I'm free. A pause. Alina, are you afraid? The question was unexpected. Yes, but more angry than afraid. His laugh was brief and genuine. Good. Anger is useful, fear paralyzes. I'll see you in a few hours. The connection ended. I stared at my phone, trying to process the rapid deterioration of what had seemed like a controlled situation. Stefan pulled into the underground garage of my building. Stay behind me, he instructed. We're going directly to your apartment, no delays. The elevator ride felt endless. When we reached my floor, Stefan checked the hallway before allowing me to exit. 2 men I didn't recognize stood at positions flanking my apartment door, Sophia's protection detail, presumably. All clear, one of them said to Stefan. No activity since we took position. Stefan unlocked my apartment door, cleared each room methodically, then nodded. You're secure. I'll be in the building if you need anything. Remember, don't open the door for anyone, I know. Alone in the apartment, I changed out of the plum dress and into comfortable clothes that felt more like myself. The luxury surrounding me suddenly felt suffocating, a gilded cage with a lock I couldn't see but could definitely feel. I was making tea when my phone rang again. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me. Elena, Salvetti's voice was smooth as oil. I hope I'm not disturbing you. Every alarm in my nervous system activated. How did you get this number? I have resources, my dear. I wanted to continue our conversation from earlier without Victor's interference. My offer stands, work for me, and I'll ensure your grandmother receives the best care available. Better than what Victor can provide, actually, since his assets may soon be frozen. I'm not interested. You should be. You're caught in a situation you don't fully understand, protecting a man who views you as a useful tool. I'm offering you a way out. Independence, security, protection from the consequences when Victor's organization inevitably collapses. Mr. Salvetti, with respect, you're wasting your time. I'm hanging up now. Before you do, consider this. Victor can't always be there to protect you. His attention is divided. His resources are under pressure. Accidents happen to people who align themselves with the wrong side. I'd hate for you or your grandmother to experience such an accident. The threat was explicit now, no more coded language or diplomatic phrasing. I kept my voice steady. Is that all? Think about it, Elena. You have 48 hours to reconsider. After that, my offer expires and the situation becomes much more complicated. He disconnected. I stood in my kitchen, heart pounding, holding a phone that suddenly felt like a weapon aimed at my head. I called Victor immediately. He answered on the first ring. Elena. Salvetti just called me. Threatened my grandmother and me if I don't switch sides within 48 hours. The silence on the other end was absolute and terrifying. When Victor spoke again, his voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. Did he specify the nature of the threat? Implied accidents. Nothing explicit enough to prosecute, but the message was clear. That's a mistake. Lorenzo just miscalculated badly. I heard movement, doors opening. I'm leaving the station now. We're accelerating the timeline. Pack a bag, essentials only. You're being relocated tonight. What about my grandmother? Already arranged. She's being transferred to a private facility in the mountains. Climate is better for respiratory issues anyway. Full medical staff, security detail, and she'll be closer to you. Transportation leaves in 90 minutes. Victor, where are we going? Somewhere safe while I handle Salvetti, somewhere he can't reach. His voice softened fractionally. Elena, I know this is overwhelming, but I promise to protect you. I'm keeping that promise. The next hours blurred into controlled chaos. Stefan and the protection detail helped me pack while Sophia coordinated logistics over encrypted communications. Lucia appeared to pack my grandmother's belongings from the hospice. By midnight, we were in two separate vehicles heading north toward the Alps. I rode with Victor, who had gone straight from the police station to meet me without even changing clothes. He looked exhausted but focused, his phone constantly buzzing with updates. The facility your grandmother is going to is one I own through a holding company, he explained as we drove through darkness. It was built as a private retreat, but has full medical capabilities. Dr. Weber will relocate there temporarily to oversee her care. And where am I going? A house in the mountains, secure, private, comfortable. You'll be there until this situation resolves. He finally looked at me directly. I won't lie to you. Salvetti threatening you and your grandmother means the conflict has entered a new phase. He's trying to force me into a position where I either sacrifice you or show weakness by backing down. I'm not willing to do either. So what happens now? Now I dismantle his position piece by piece. He's made enemies in his climb to power. I'm going to remind those enemies why they resented him and offer them better alternatives. Victor's smile was predatory. Lorenzo thinks violence is beneath him, but financial destruction, reputational devastation, those are my specialties. Will it be enough? It will have to be. Because the alternative is a war neither of us can afford, and I refuse to let you become a casualty. We drove higher into the mountains, the air growing thinner and cleaner. Around 3 in the morning, we turned onto a private road that wound through pine forests and ended at a house that was more architectural statement than shelter, all glass and steel and dramatic angles, clinging to the mountainside like it had grown there. "This is my personal retreat," Victor said as we pulled into the garage. "Very few people know it exists. You're safe here." The interior was minimalist luxury, open spaces, natural materials, views that went on forever. Victor showed me to a bedroom with windows overlooking the valley, then paused at the door. "There are 2 guest rooms and a master suite. I'll be in the master. We're not alone. There's a security team on the property and staff who manage the house, but it's private." He seemed to struggle with his next words. "Alina, I know this isn't what you signed up for. The contract gave you an out. You could still take it." I set down my bag and turned to face him. "You said loyalty is earned, not demanded. You've earned mine. I'm staying." Something shifted in his expression, relief and something deeper that I wasn't ready to name. "Then get some rest. Tomorrow we start planning, and tomorrow your grandmother arrives at the facility. You can video call her once she's settled." He left me alone in a room that cost more than my entire previous year of existence, looking out at mountains I'd only ever seen from bus windows. I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt oddly calm. I'd made my choice. Now I'd live with the consequences. I fell asleep to the sound of wind in the pines and woke to sunlight on snow. The house was quiet, but I could hear activity, security patrols, staff preparing breakfast. I showered and dressed in clothes Lucia had packed, then found my way to the main living area. Victor was already there, laptop open, phone pressed to his ear. He was speaking rapid Russian to someone, his tone clipped and authoritative. When he saw me, he wrapped up the conversation and set the phone aside. "Coffee?" He gestured to a French press that looked professional grade. "Your grandmother arrived at the facility an hour ago. She's settling in well. Dr. Weber says the altitude might actually be beneficial for her breathing." I poured coffee that tasted better than anything I'd ever made. "What happens now?" "Now we wait and work. I have meetings via secure connection. You'll monitor and translate as usual, but we're also going to prepare for the endgame with Salvetti." He pulled up documents on his laptop. "I've identified 3 key pressure points: his political connections, his shipping contracts, and his family reputation. We're going to systematically undermine all 3. How? By being more strategic than he expects. Lorenzo relies on old relationships and intimidation. I rely on documentation and leverage." Victor turned the laptop so I could see. "These are records of his less-than-legal dealings, bribery, contract fraud, environmental violations. Nothing I couldn't match in my own operations, but that's not the point. The point is exposure." "You're going to blackmail him." "I'm going to offer him a choice: retire gracefully or watch his empire crumble publicly. Most people choose option 1. Victor's expression was calm. "This is how conflicts end in my world. Not with violence, but with calculated pressure and exits that preserve everyone's dignity." Over the next days, I watched Victor orchestrate Salvetti's isolation with surgical precision. Phone calls to political contacts, meetings with rival business interests, quiet leaks of information to journalists who asked the right questions. He never raised his voice, never made overt threats, just methodically closed off Salvetti's options. I contributed where I could, translating documents, catching nuances in recorded conversations, helping Victor anticipate responses. We worked long hours in the mountain house, the security team invisible but present, the world outside reduced to strategic considerations and chess moves. But in the evenings, something shifted. Victor would close his laptop, pour wine, and we'd sit by the floor-to-ceiling windows watching sunset paint the mountains gold. He asked about my life before, the languages I'd learned, the books I'd read, the dreams I'd deferred. "What would you do if you could do anything?" he asked one evening. "Study linguistics properly, maybe teach, create programs for immigrants learning new languages." I stared into my wine glass. Things that required stability I never had. "You could have that now. The salary I'm paying you, even after 3 months, it's enough to start." "If I survive the 3 months." "You will, I'll make sure of it." He was quiet for a moment. "Elena, I need to tell you something about why I offered you this position in the first place." I set down my glass and waited. "It wasn't just about your language skills or your ability to read situations. It was because when I saw you that night at Palazzo Nero, injured and exhausted and still standing, still working, still fighting, you reminded me of my father, not physically but in spirit. He built his empire from nothing, fought through opposition, never surrendered." Victor's voice was raw. "He died when I was 19. Heart attack, sudden and final. I inherited his organization and his enemies. I've spent 20 years trying to be worthy of what he built. And you think you're not." "I think I'm different from him. He ruled through fear and respect. I want to rule through partnerships and mutual benefit, but that makes me vulnerable to people like Salvetti who see compassion as weakness." He met my eyes. "You're not just a translator, Elena. You're a reminder that a different approach is possible, that strength can coexist with humanity." The confession hung between us, honest and exposed. I understood then that Victor was as isolated as I'd been, just in a different way. His wealth and power had walls, same as my poverty. We were both looking for connection in a world designed to keep us separate. "I'm not that remarkable," I said finally. "You are, you just don't see it yet." He stood, offering his hand. "Come on, I want to show you something." He led me to his study, a room I hadn't entered before. The walls were lined with books in multiple languages, and at the center stood a desk covered in old photographs. He picked up one and handed it to me. "Budapest, 1956, my father and your grandfather." The photograph showed two men standing beside a railway car, both wearing the kind of determined expressions that spoke of survival and defiance. I recognized my grandfather's face from the few photos my grandmother had saved. "They knew each other," I said, stunned. "More than that, they trusted each other. Your grandfather could have betrayed my father to the Soviets for a reward. He didn't, and my father never forgot that loyalty." Victor picked up another photo, a letter in Hungarian. "Your grandfather wrote to my father, asking him to look after your grandmother if anything happened. My father died before he could fulfill that promise." "So you're fulfilling it for him?" "In part, but also because when I researched you and found that connection, it felt like fate, like the universe was offering me a chance to honor my father's debt and build something new at the same time." His hand brushed mine. "You're not just an employee, Elena. You're a legacy responsibility that became something more." I understood then what my grandmother had tried to warn me about. Victor didn't love like ordinary people. He loved like a man who'd built his identity around honor and obligation, which meant his care for me was real but also complicated by history and expectation. "What happens when this is over?" I asked. "When Salvetti is neutralized and my 3 months are up?" "That depends on what you want. I'd like you to stay, not as an obligation but as a partner in what I'm building. But if you want to leave, pursue your own dreams, I'll support that too." He was closer now, his hand fully covering mine. "What do you want, Elena?" The question was impossible and essential. I wanted safety and adventure. I wanted independence and connection. I wanted to not be afraid anymore, but also to not lose myself in someone else's protection. I want time to figure that out, I said honestly, without threats hanging over us, without crisis forcing decisions. Fair, he stepped back, giving me space. Then let's finish this situation first. After that, you can decide on your own terms. The next morning brought news that shifted everything. Matteo called with updates. Salvetti's main political contact had been arrested for corruption unrelated to our conflict. 2 of his shipping contracts had been canceled due to environmental violations. His son Marco had been photographed at a nightclub, engaged in activities that didn't align with the family's respectable image. He's collapsing faster than expected, Matteo reported. The pressure is working. But Victor's expression was cautious. Cornered animals are most dangerous. We need to offer him the exit now before he does something desperate. That afternoon, Victor arranged a video call with Salvetti. I listened from off-camera as the 2 men negotiated the terms of Salvetti's surrender, the word they never used but everyone understood. I'm offering you a graceful transition, Victor said calmly. Announce retirement due to health concerns. Transfer your shipping operations to a consortium we'll establish together. Your family keeps their reputation, their wealth, and their freedom. You just exit the active business. Salvetti looked older on screen, diminished. And if I refuse? Then the documents I've compiled go public. Your political connections get exposed. Your contracts get investigated. Your son's indiscretions become prosecution material. Victor's voice was even, not threatening, just stating facts. Lorenzo, you've had a good run. It's time to pass the torch to the next generation. The silence stretched. Finally, Salvetti nodded. I want assurances, written agreements, protection for my family. Done. I'll have my lawyers prepare documents. We'll structure this so everyone saves face. Victor leaned forward. And Lorenzo, no retaliation. The girl and her grandmother are permanently off limits. That's non-negotiable. Agreed. The call ended. Victor sat back in his chair, exhaling slowly. It's over. I stepped into view, just like that. Just like that, he'll announce retirement next week. We'll absorb his operations through legal channels. His enemies will think he lost. His friends will think he's making a strategic withdrawal. Everyone's dignity intact. He looked at me. You're safe now. Your grandmother is safe. The threat is neutralized. The relief should have been immediate and complete. Instead, I felt oddly hollow. The crisis that had defined my last weeks was over, which meant I had to face the question Victor had asked. What did I actually want? When can I see my grandmother? I asked. Any time. We can visit the facility this afternoon if you'd like. The drive down the mountain felt different, less like escape, more like choice. The facility Victor had arranged was beautiful, a converted chalet with medical wings disguised as guest suites. My grandmother sat in a sunroom overlooking snow-covered peaks, looking healthier than I'd seen her in months. Kislinium, she said, pulling me into a hug that smelled like lavender and home. Look at you, you survived. We did, I settled beside her. How are you feeling? Strong, the altitude, the treatment, Dr. Weber's attention. I might actually have some good time left. She studied my face. And you, what happens now? I glanced at Victor, who had stayed near the door, giving us privacy. I don't know yet. Let me tell you what I see, my grandmother said. I see a girl who went from invisible to essential in 2 months, who learned to navigate a world she didn't understand and held her ground against powerful enemies, who earned the respect and protection of a man who doesn't give either lightly. She squeezed my hand. I also see a girl who's afraid to want more than survival, who's so used to scraping by that she doesn't know how to accept abundance. It's not really abundance. It's all borrowed. Victor's generosity, this facility, the apartment, none of it's mine. So make it yours, negotiate, Set terms. Stop thinking like an employee and start thinking like a partner. She leaned closer. That Constantine, he's waiting for you to claim your value. He offered you a foundation. Now build your own structure on it. We talked until sunset painted the mountains copper and gold. When Victor and I finally left, I felt clearer than I had in weeks. In the car, I turned to him. I want to renegotiate our arrangement. He didn't look surprised. All right, what terms? I stay on as your executive assistant for 1 year, not 3 months. Full salary, benefits, and my grandmother's care continues. But I also enroll in university part-time to finish my linguistics degree. You get my professional skills during business hours, but my education time is mine. Done. What else? I want autonomy. I'll be loyal, but I won't be controlled. I'll advise you, translate for you, work with you. But I make my own decisions about my life, my relationships, my future. Also done. Anything else? I took a breath. I need to understand what we are. Employer-employee is clear, but there's something else happening here and I need you to name it. Victor was quiet for a long moment, the road unwinding before us in the dusk. You're right. There's something else. I care about you beyond your professional value. I think about you when you're not there. I want to protect you not because you work for me, but because the idea of you being hurt is intolerable. He glanced at me. But I also know that care from someone like me can feel like pressure or obligation. So I'm giving you space to decide what you want this to be. What if I don't know yet? Then we take time to figure it out. Without crisis, without threats, just two people learning who they are to each other. He pulled the car to the side of the road, turned to face me fully. Elena, I'm not good at this. I'm good at strategy and control. But with you, I want to be better. I want to be someone who deserves what he's offering and what he's receiving. His honesty was devastating and liberating. I reached for his hand. Then let's learn together. No expectations, no timelines, just possibility. He raised my hand to his lips, a gesture that was courtly and intimate. Possibility. I can work with that. We drove back to the mountain house in comfortable silence, and that night I slept better than I had in years. The next months unfolded with the rhythm of chosen life instead of circumstantial survival. I enrolled in university, taking online courses in linguistics and language theory. I continued working with Victor, attending meetings, translating, advising. But the power dynamics had shifted. I was a partner now, compensated fairly and respected for my contributions. My grandmother's health stabilized. The immunotherapy protocol worked better than Dr. Weber had dared hope, giving her energy and clarity she hadn't had in years. We video called daily, and I visited the mountain facility every weekend. Victor and I circled each other like dancers learning a new choreography. He'd find reasons to brush my hand during meetings. I'd linger in his study after work, discussing books and ideas that had nothing to do with business. We had dinner together most evenings, conversations that ranged from philosophy to memories to dreams we'd never admitted to anyone. What will you leave behind? I asked him one night, echoing a question he'd once posed in a different context. He considered it seriously. I want to leave an organization that operates on better principles than the one I inherited. I want the people who work for me to feel valued, not exploited. I want a legacy of partnership, not domination. He met my eyes, and I want to have lived fully, not just strategically. Are you living fully now? More fully than I was 6 months ago. You changed something fundamental when you walked into my world, Elena. You reminded me that vulnerability isn't weakness, that asking for what you want isn't surrender. In the spring, my grandmother called with news. Dr. Weber says I might have years, not months. Kislinium, I'm going to live to see what becomes of you. I laughed through tears. No pressure then. Oh, there's pressure, but the good kind. The kind that means I'm here to witness your choices, not haunt them. She paused. Have you told Victor you love him yet? The question froze me. I don't. Yes, you do. I see it in how you talk about him, how you light up when he calls, how you defend him to yourself when you're afraid of wanting too much." Her voice was gentle. "It's okay to love him, Kislanium. It's okay to want more than survival." That evening, I found Victor in his study, reviewing contracts. I knocked on the door frame, and he looked up with the smile he reserved just for me. "Am I interrupting?" "Always come in." He closed his laptop, giving me his full attention. I sat across from him, gathering courage. "I need to tell you something. My grandmother asked if I loved you. I told her I didn't know, but that was a lie." His expression shifted, hope and caution warring. "And the truth?" "The truth is that I do. I love how you keep your promises, how you're building something better than what you inherited, how you gave me safety and then gave me the freedom to choose whether to stay." I took a breath. "But I'm also afraid, because you're powerful and I'm still learning to stand at the same level instead of looking up, and I don't know if I'm ready for what loving you might require." Victor stood and came around the desk, kneeling beside my chair so we were at eye level. "Loving me requires exactly what you're already doing, being honest, maintaining your autonomy, challenging me when I'm wrong. I don't want you to look up at me, Alina. I want you beside me as an equal." "Are we equals, really?" "In the ways that matter, yes. You have skills I don't, perspectives I need, courage I admire, and you have the power to leave, which means staying is a choice, not a trap." His hand found mine. "I love you too. I have for a while, but I didn't want to say it until you were certain you could say no without consequences." "I can say no. Always, to anything, to everything. You're free, Alina, that's the point." I kissed him then, finally allowing the want I'd been suppressing. He kissed me back with gentleness and intensity, his hands framing my face like I was something precious. When we broke apart, I was breathless and certain. "I choose this," I said. "I choose you, not because I need you, but because I want you." His smile was brilliant. That's all I needed to hear. The next year brought changes that felt like evolution instead of crisis. Salvetti's retirement opened space for Victor to restructure the regional shipping infrastructure with better labor practices and environmental standards. Other business leaders noticed and adapted, creating a ripple effect Victor had orchestrated but not forced. I finished my degree in linguistics and started a consulting firm that specialized in helping immigrant businesses navigate language barriers. Victor was my first investor, but I maintained full control. We kept our professional lives separate and our personal lives intertwined. My grandmother lived to see my graduation. She walked slowly but steadily to her seat in the audience, Dr. Weber beside her, Victor on her other side. When they called my name, she stood and cheered in Hungarian. That evening, at dinner with Victor and my grandmother, she raised her glass. "To new beginnings and old debts that became blessings." We toasted, the three of us bound by history and choice. My grandmother passed peacefully 2 years later in her sleep at the mountain facility, surrounded by the care and comfort Victor had provided. I held her hand as she drifted away, her last words in Hungarian. "You chose well, Kislanium. Live fully." Her funeral was small, just Victor, Dr. Weber, Lucia, Matteo, and me. We buried her overlooking the mountains she'd grown to love, a place where the air was clean and the view went on forever. Victor held me through the grief, steady and present. He didn't try to fix it, just gave me space to feel it. "She was remarkable," he said, "like her granddaughter." 3 years after that cold night at Palazzo Nero, Victor proposed. Not with grand gestures or surprise, but with a conversation about future and partnership. "I want to build a life with you," he said. "Not because I own you or control you, but because we're better together than separate. Marry me, Alina. Be my partner in everything." I said yes, because the answer felt like coming home. Our wedding was small, held at the mountain house with views of the Alps. Stefan gave me away. Lucia cried. Matteo smiled. And Victor promised to honor my autonomy, my dreams, and my courage for the rest of our lives. I promised the same, knowing that this was the life I'd chosen, not the life circumstances had forced on me. Years later, I stood in the study Victor and I now shared, looking at the photograph of my grandfather and his father. Our organization had grown into something neither of them would have imagined, a network built on fairness, protection of the vulnerable, and strategic compassion. Victor appeared behind me, his arms wrapping around my waist, thinking about the past, about how we got here, about choices and chances. And what do you conclude? I turned in his arms, looking up at the man who'd offered me a business card and changed my entire trajectory. I conclude that sometimes the best things start with desperate circumstances and someone willing to see value where others see invisibility. You were never invisible, Alina, just unnoticed. There's a difference. And now you're exactly where you belong, visible, valued, and free. He kissed my forehead. What's next for us? I smiled. Anything we choose. And in that moment, standing in a house on a mountain, surrounded by the life we'd built from crisis and choice, I understood what my grandmother had meant. Not just survival, but living. Not just endurance, but joy. Not just acceptance, but active creation of the world we wanted to inhabit. From cold anonymity to warm chosen home, from invisible to essential, from survival to thriving. The journey had required courage, but the destination was worth every risk. And I would choose it again, every single time.